Hey, Latvian visi. We're so happy to see you today for our first Thursday. It's been a bit chaotic since 7 a.m. when we made the decision to go online only. And if you'd like to see what it looks like at Matis's end of the Latvian Center, I just posted a photo on Facebook, and he had to get through there so that he can actually show this to us all online. So today we're so happy to present Maimu Mulder and Margot McWhirter. And this is really kind of our first real collaboration with the Estonians. So thank you so much, Maimu. We hope to have a lot more of these on the first Thursdays of each month. And if you'd like to know what's happening at TLPA and on these first Thursdays, please go to latvianseniors.org. We send out a newsletter every Friday, and you can find the link in the chat box. Thank you so much. Over to Andres for bios.
Greetings from sunny Burlington. Would you believe that this is the view from my window? Anyway. Okay, our speakers today. Maimu Mulder. First of all, she was educated at U of T, where she achieved a BA with double majors in political science and English literature. And then Toronto Metropolitan University, where she received a certificate in gerontology. Maimu Mulder has studied aging and universal design and brings a practical experience from work in aging services, including for an accessible home renovations company. She is truly a, quote, home modification specialist for living in place, unquote. In addition to that, as the managing director of ērtāku Foundation, Maimu is actively involved in cultural events and fundraising initiatives that celebrate Baltic heritage and promote care, dignity, and inclusion. Over to Margot McWhirter. Well, she is an aging in place and accessibility consultant, patient navigator, and a public speaker and educator. She has 30 plus years of experience in both public and private healthcare sectors, working with individuals, caregiver groups, and businesses. This includes occupational therapy, gerontology, universal design, adult learning, and patient navigation. She's passionate about promoting social inclusion to help people achieve success in whatever roles and environments are most meaningful to them. Her experience, well, she was founder in May of 2019 of Inclusive Aging, which is a consulting business founded on the belief that older adults are valued members of the communities in which they live, volunteer, work, shop, and play. It recognizes that for some people, the aging process involves physical or cognitive changes that disrupt the ability to go about one's daily activities and to maintain key relationships with ease. Their goal is to prevent physical or social isolation and the loss of independence or dignity by concentrating on registered occupational therapy, accessibility and aging in place assessments, business of aging consultation, and patient navigation of healthcare and social systems. Margot's education consists of several different things. McMaster University, Bachelor of Arts, honors in gerontology and sociology, then a Bachelor of Health Sciences, Occupational Therapy, where she was the actual valedictorian. And then at Simon Fraser University, a Master of Arts in Gerontology, with a thesis titled Resident-Centered Care and the Quality of Life of Long-Term Care Facility Residents. And then Sheridan College, a Certificate in Universal Design, and York University, Certificate of Patient Navigation, and also USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology with an Executive Certificate of Home Modification. So I think we're going to be getting a lot of very good information that'll be pertinent to all of us, both as givers and receivers of help. Over to you.
Thank you, Andres. I want to compliment you on your research. We had it in bios, but you've done some very nice research on that. So thank you for filling that out for us. I want to firstly thank the TLPA for the kind invitation to present. The Latvian community has become a second home for Estonians, for which we are truly thankful. I'm here on behalf of ērtāku Foundation, which organizes supports and activities for the older set. And we are grateful for also to the New Horizons Seniors Program for funding support for several of our events, including today. But before I introduce a little bit more about Margot, who I have known for many years, more in a professional capacity, I want to briefly, for the next 5 minutes, touch on a subject which is dear to my heart. I had an epiphany many years ago as I watched a number of my loved ones age, some more easily than others. I imagined what it would be like to be wheelchair bound, sitting in the middle of my street. And I realized that I would not be able to enter a single home on my street, including my own. And from this grew this passion that I now have for universal design. And when I was envisioning this presentation, I was thinking I was going to ask questions from the audience to find out what people are not, how knowledgeable people are on three topics. And since that isn't going to happen, I'm going to still throw out those terms and just guesstimate what the responses would have been like. Who's heard of the term accessibility? Would have been my first question and is my first question. And usually people have an idea of have an idea of accessibility. They've heard of the term. They know people who have accessibility issues. The next one is universal design. And at this point, there will be less hands going up. Some people have heard of the term, some haven't. And the third one is visitability. And I'm thinking more of visitability in the home. And this one, fewer people are aware of. So I'm just going to jump into this because I'm really excited to hear what Margot has to talk about. So I don't want to keep us waiting. I'll just talk a little bit about accessibility. Accessibility usually means making changes so someone with a disability or experiencing decline from aging can use a space. So think ramps added later, grab bars installed after a fall, possibly a stair lift added when stairs become a problem. So accessibility in essence is essential, but it's often reactive. It usually happens after someone's run into a barrier in their lives. You've probably seen this before where you see a beautiful main entrance. And then if you look to the side of the building, oh, there may be a ramp set up, maybe beside the recycling bins, that type of thing. So it works, but it doesn't always feel welcoming. And now here's the word that almost nobody uses, and that's visitability. Visitability is simple. It means someone with a mobility issue can visit your home. So that usually comes down to three basic things. We're looking at a step-free way to get into the house. Once you're inside, doorways that are wide enough to get through. If it's a wheelchair we're talking about, there's room for a wheelchair to move. And importantly, a bathroom on the main floor that's actually usable. So nothing, it needs to be necessarily fancy, not clinical, just functional. So visitability, a bit of a mouthful, answers the question, can my friend come over for dinner and use the washroom? Because if the answer is no, then these people will not be visiting. And that's not about architecture, it's about belonging, being connected. Now to my favorite concept, which is universal design. Universal design means designing homes that work for people throughout their entire lives without needing major changes later. It's not about disability, it's about good design. So examples here would be no-step entrances that work for strollers, groceries, and aging needs. So we're talking about, it covers the whole age gamut from children to older adults. It's seamless, you don't even think about it. It's just there. For example, a second example is lever door handles instead of knobs. They're great for if someone has arthritis, but also when your hands are full, you can use your elbow to open a door and bring in your groceries. Walk-in showers is a third example that work. It doesn't matter if you're 25 or 85. It's just nice getting into a space without any kind of tripping hazard. And universal design asks, how can this home support me from birth to the end of life? And personally, I believe this is where society needs to be aiming. And because most of us will experience accessibility challenges at some point through injury, illness, aging, it just makes sense. And why this matters, here's the irony. Universal design helps everyone, yet it's still treated as special, a special feature. But in essence, it reduces the needs to renovate later, obviously saving you money. It makes homes easier to live in, and it lets people stay in their homes longer without being forced to move when their home no longer works for them. And let's be honest, moving is expensive, stressful, exhausting. So a good way to remember all of this: accessibility fixes barriers after they exist. Visitability makes sure people can come inside and feel welcome. Universal design prevents barriers in the first place. Or another way to put it, accessibility says, we need to fix this. Visitability says, come on in. And universal design says, you can stay here for life. So in closing, none of us knows what our bodies will need in the next 10 or 20 years, but we do know this. We know we want to stay independent, we want to stay connected, and we want to keep inviting people over to dinner. So designing homes with universal design and visitability in mind helps all of us do exactly that. So I am looking forward to Margot McWhirter's talk. I've known Margot for many years. She is a sought-after speaker regarding aging in place. She is well respected by healthcare professionals and those she has helped, including in the Estonian community. Margot and I keep running into each other at conferences, community meetings, various seniors' homes, and we even work together at the National Home Show's Aging at Home Pavilion, which I've helped organize for the past 3 years. I'd like now to invite Margot up, and if we have time after, I'd be happy to flip through a few photos from a community member's universal home, just to show some examples of someone we know who has done universal design. So Margot?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maimu. That was a lovely sort of appetizer, if you will, to some of the information that I'm going to talk about today. And certainly many, many thanks to Mara, Andres, Ivers, and Tomatis for the invitation, but also all of the coordination. And I just have to share, because when we talk about belonging and community, when Ivers was talking about the Naismith Awards and the anniversary of basketball in Canada, so Zach Eby, who is one of the Canadians who he identified as winning, actually grew up in Leaside in Toronto, which is the community that I'm from. So it's funny how that's a small world. So just being mindful of time, I am going to go ahead and share my screen and go through the information. And obviously we will have time for questions at the end. And so really looking forward to getting into some of the information with you today. So this idea of thriving in place really speaks to some of the kind of, not the theory, the actual practical application of what Maimu had talked about. And I'm going to come back to that as well. So really, in terms of why we're here, why there's such an interest in this topic, we know from research, but even in my practice and my own family, we know that most people want to stay in their own homes as they age. At the same time, injuries and other medical events, both chronic and acute, often happen at home, and that in many cases, small changes can make a big difference in terms of quality of life, ability to continue to live at home, and just in terms of overall wellness and happiness. So some things to consider is at the same time that we're aging, and I like to say, because people go, oh, you're so young, or they used to, I say we're all aging at the same rate, which is one day at a time. Many of the homes that we live in, whether it's a house or an apartment or a condominium, they may be newer builds, but in many cases, certainly throughout the GTA, homes may be 40, 50, 80 years of age. And even if we are proud homeowners and we maintain our space, homes don't always age well. And in fact, apropos of Maimu's comments about some of the design, this idea of designing for visitability and certainly universal design, that's not on the minds of many planners, builders, developers. It's becoming more so, but it's not the norm. The other thing is bodies change, which is entirely normal. I like to say aging is not a disease, so it's not that we're all going to fall apart. And even irrespective of specific health conditions, whether that's an orthopedic issue, chronic back pain, a neurological condition, be it a stroke, Parkinson's disease, any number of things, the typical age-related changes that we see that exist in society have to do with pain, with decreased flexibility, and loss of mobility. And so rather than saying, well, somebody with X condition, needs to either move, or how do we design, a home for, it's that we recognize, especially with an aging population, the likelihood of people, myself included, and many of you perhaps, having a chronic health condition, whether it's diabetes or whatnot, that is going to, plague us throughout our life, hopefully well managed, sometimes better, sometimes worse. And it can be easier in some cases to think about modifying the home rather than changing the body. That's not to say that we don't have a responsibility to maintain our health, to do all of those lifestyle choices and things that keep our bodies healthy. But in many cases, especially as we age, and particularly if somebody has multiple health issues, physical or cognitive, rather than expecting them to adjust to their home environment, we actually should say, why aren't our homes more responsive to our needs? So thinking about some of those losses or that changes that can happen as we age, we have to, kind of put that in the context of the homes in which we, live. And, in most cases, homes are designed, built, and sold for younger families, sometimes downsizing for individuals or couples, but the fixtures, the design elements and features within a home often don't account for changes in balance and reaction time, changes in vision, such as, lighting, and I'm going to talk a lot about lighting today. Also changes in strength and endurance. Energy and thinking about energy conservation is really an important part of thinking about planning smartly to age in place. And then that joint stiffness and pain, which can fluctuate throughout the day and from day to day. For those who need some help, and it's not an on-off switch, so it's not I'm totally independent or I'm completely dependent. For those who need some help, our homes can actually be where care happens. Again, this idea that aging is not a disease, and while some of us may on occasion need to go to hospital, very few of us actually need to leave our homes, but we might need care, whether it's personal care, medical care, etc., coming in to our homes. So our homes are still our space. We own it. We have a responsibility for taking care of it. We insure it, and it's our private space. But it starts to become a little bit more of a shared space as we age, or at least it can be for some people. So what I'm going to go through fairly high level, I'm going to try not to rush, but I do tend to pack a lot of information into presentations, and for that I apologize. But as an occupational therapist, thinking about how people function in the design world, in the spaces that they live in and inhabit, the questions that I always am asking and evaluating when I come into somebody's home to do a home assessment is, how do you get in and out of your home? How do you move around within that space? How do you use the bathroom? And then other key areas, the living areas, the kitchen, the bedrooms, etc. So really kind of focusing on some key areas. It's not that I don't look at other areas, but it's really kind of prioritizing, if you will. So in terms of some, again, I'm just going high level here, but thinking about how we get in and out of our home, whether it's external stairs or stairs once we're inside the home, often, coming and going. Hopefully our homes are active social places, so there can be a lot of traffic. There may be shoes at the front door, etc. Not always the best lighting, especially in condos or apartments and older homes. And then there may be missing or inadequate railings. I, like to go for walks in my neighborhoods and other neighborhoods, and I often take pictures of front entrances that are just like accidents waiting to happen. And it just breaks my heart because it doesn't need to be that way. So in terms of some easy fixes, because that's what I want to focus on with you today, while also talking about some of the bigger picture solutions, is, and I said this before, I'm going to talk a lot about lighting. If you have either limited funds or just limited motivation to make too many changes, one of the best changes that you can make to your home to make it more inclusive and safe and age-friendly is to put more lighting in. And so whether it's motion sensor lighting, indoors or out, certainly anywhere where there's a change in level, so 1 step, 2 steps up to a full staircase, having handrails on both sides of the stairs is proven through research to be far safer than just a single rail and maybe the wall. Another piece to accommodate changes in vision, yes, additional lighting can be helpful, but also having some sort of high contrast, either at the step edges or at least, sort of where the treads are, because sometimes our depth perception changes and we need those visual aids, because as well, if we have a condition called peripheral neuropathy, or, for some people with diabetes, they may lose that feeling in their feet. So they may not actually know where a step is. So that color contrast and high contrast is important. And then you sort of don't graduate from OT school, and I say this a bit tongue in cheek, if you don't go into everybody's home and tell them to declutter and get rid of loose mats and rugs. I've been doing this too long. I tell people, I'm not going to tell you to take up your rugs and mats because most people are like wedded to that, but I will at least address it and say, can we get you some warm footwear that's non-slippery so that we could get rid of a few of these rugs? And, I've gone into homes where there's been broadloom carpet wall to wall, and then 1 or 2 layers of carpeting on top of that because people want to protect the carpet. And I'm like, but at what cost? So I pick my battles. In terms of kind of going that extra step, and this is only a few examples of things to consider around stairs and at entrances, there's all kinds of both universal design solutions. So that image on the right that you're seeing, where essentially from the sidewalk or the driveway, it's paved and contoured. There's, a slight ramp, but it's really just that 0-step entry that Maimu had talked about. And then, there are lots of ways of overcoming changes in level to make it more accessible, inclusive, visitable. So it's things like porch lifts, stair lifts, and then even interior residential elevators, which, some of these things come with very high price tags. Others, if it's the cost of you being able to stay in your home and maybe live independently or access all areas of your home that you want and need to, if you think of it amortized over 5 years or 25 years, it may be a real small price to pay. But I've been trying to figure out the human psychology of all of this for over 30 years. And I know that some people just, A, don't like the look, and B, don't want to spend the money. And that's a kind of a different conversation. Important, but different. So then when we look at bathrooms, obviously, part of human nature, human function is that we need to use a bathroom. And why it's a particular area of focus when we're thinking about aging in place is, first of all, it's usually slippery from tile and flooring surfaces to water, to wet. It can often be quite tight and confined. So whether somebody is using a walker or a cane or might need a wheelchair, again, these spaces are not designed not just to be able to use the space, but to maneuver in and out and turn. So that's one of the other things that I look at, and when I'm recommending and working with builders, designers, etc. It's not just enough to say, okay, my wheelchair is 32 inches wide from the outside of the wheels and about 36 inches deep. It fits in this spot. Well, we actually have to think how you move in and out of that spot, and what angle do you need your walker or your wheelchair or your helper, because we might have to plan for a second caregiver or a caregiver to occupy that same space. Do we actually have functional space within this bathroom? The other thing is, some people are in a rush when they're going to use the bathroom, and so then the slippery, tight spaces, etc. It's a huge risk. And then finally, because, privacy and independence is so fiercely guarded, I've literally seen people that have put their own health in jeopardy by dehydrating themselves, by maybe not eating certain foods so that they don't have to use the bathroom as often. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen or I don't understand why it happens, but it doesn't have to be this way. Some changes, and we'll talk about some of the smaller ones as well as the bigger ones, can make a big difference. And much like if you won the lottery or you had the opportunity to basically redo some features in your home, often it's real estate agents and designers who tell you bathrooms and kitchens sell houses. So if we can redesign bathrooms and kitchens for a lot of people, as well as the entrances, that's going to make a big difference to them being able to be comfortable and safe and independent in their own home. So I've got some pictures in a moment, and when Maimu shows you the slides from the universally designed home here in the Toronto area, you'll probably see more of these. And I appreciate that for some people, when we talk about things like grab bars and raised toilet seats and bath seats, they're like, those aren't small changes. I don't want that. I don't want my house to feel like a hospital. I don't want it to look institutional. So I'm talking about, relatively speaking, inexpensive, simple changes. But I get up here and in our hearts, it's big changes. And that's, why working with a clinician, helping you choose the best equipment for you, and, really basically, I think just having somebody who's empathetic and not, and I'm not dismissing people who sell this equipment. They're great at what they do too. It's not about selling you something or giving you a long shopping list. It's actually about the goal of you staying safe and independent at home. So I know that these are busy slides, but I wanted to just kind of get across the idea that whether we're talking about grab bars or bath seats, and on the next page we're going to talk about about toilets and other solutions, there is literally a range of products and solutions. And so again, working with an occupational therapist who can do a clinical assessment of you and make recommendations and suggestions about why solution A might be better than solution B. And then, together with folks like Maimu, with interior designers, and even knowledgeable sales associates in bathroom or kitchen design places, let alone medical supply stores, there are beautiful solutions in terms of grab bars. Not every product category has a beautiful solution yet, but the marketplace demands that. So hopefully over the next few years, we'll see more beautiful and functional solutions. So these are, again, just some more examples of different types of transfer aids and devices for getting on and off the toilet, as well as different shower products. So, we certainly can come back to that if there's questions, but just wanted to highlight that. And then in terms of some bigger changes that are possible, the first two images are for a project where there were actually two people, mid-age and older, who were living in the same house in a multi-generational home. One of the household members was short in stature, but a fully grown adult. And then the other was an older adult who was dependent on others for care. So the kinds of things that I just want to point out here is in the first image on the left. So I've put some painter's tape in terms of where we were thinking of putting grab bars and toilet paper roll, because sometimes even thinking about those fine details are really important. And then the other thing about this toilet is, again, over the course of my career, when I first graduated, we weren't talking about bidets, but now bidets are almost, and this is a bidet seat, are almost second nature. And a lot of people are putting them in because it's a convenience, it's a hygiene issue. So if somebody has difficulty wiping, then a bidet seat can help them, again, privacy, independence, and hygiene. The middle image shows that zero threshold shower with some walls to contain. You can't see, but I'm actually standing in the back wall of the shower. There's lots of room for the individual and the caregiver. There's a shower niche to hold soaps and shampoos. And then the image on the right is that walk-in tub, which people often think, oh, that's the solution. And I just pointed out because it's the right solution for some people, but often by the time, I see people or my moo might be talking to people, they're beyond the point of benefiting from a walk-in tub. They actually need a wheel-in shower or a step-in shower, zero-step in shower, because you actually need quite a bit of balance and strength and coordination to get in and out of a walk-in or a walk-in bathtub. Again, it's not wrong. It's just, it's not for everybody. Some things to think about in terms of the kitchen. So I'm, all of 5'3" on a good day. If I had any problems with back pain, with shoulder pain, hand pain, etc., let alone neck pain, that reaching overhead can be a real challenge. In some cases, standing for long periods, which for some people, they can stand for 20 minutes and then they have to rest. For other people, standing for 2 minutes is an eternity. And unfortunately, by and large, appliances and work surfaces are not designed for as task areas for sitting. We also have issues with poor task lighting, and then there's the potential for glare because fortunately kitchens often have natural light, but like bathrooms, they can have a lot of shiny surfaces, the glass, the chrome, the flooring, etc. And that glare can pose a vision problem if need be. Okay, great. Sorry, I just saw something come up in the chat. I was just checking. It wasn't for me. So in terms of some simple improvements in and around the kitchen, so good rule of thumb, and this is really throughout the home, but often in kitchens we're, reaching up into overhead storage or down into storage above below the waist, I should say, is aim to have the things that you use on a regular basis, and particularly heavier things like whether it's a amount of flour or something, but try to store those items between your waist and your shoulder height. Then you're not reaching way up or having to bend way down. Having pull-out shelves and lazy Susans for corner units, having anti-fatigue floor mats, as long as they're not the really thick ones that are a tripping hazard, and then under cabinet lighting so you can really see what you're doing. Some additional things, and again, I mean, you can spend money in kitchens even without making it inclusive or universal, but if you're going to spend the money, do it thoughtfully. So this idea that we can actually have cascading upper cabinetry hardware that brings things to us, not just the pull-out shelves and drawers under cabinetry. So typically, you know, anytime you've got the countertop and below, you want things coming out to you. And then upper cabinet, you know, highly or often used items in that, you know, first low shelf, and then otherwise if you can have items come down to you. Thinking about contrast, thinking about appliances that are at counter height or below, even things like the controls for the stove and light switches and electrical outlets, move those to the front of the countertop or even the side so that you're not reaching across and trying to you know, reach across, especially a hot stove. And then thinking about color contrast. Interestingly, the center and the right picture, those are two different kitchens, but they both include this kind of lovely wood grain and then that blue color. The center image there on the bottom, that's actually a client that I worked with, and she has, this is from a Chatelaine magazine, I think it is. Her interior designer specializes in inclusive design, and she turned a like 3-story annex, beautiful Victorian row house into suites, and the client moved from the whole home down to the main floor, and they did a lovely job, and I was able to be part of that. Some other areas of the home that we have to think about. So in the living areas and the bedrooms, so, you know, again, we have to realize as we age, different health conditions, there might be multiple nighttime bathroom trips. The bedding might be low, and certainly in living room or den areas might be very soft seating, and those things aren't necessarily great for bodies that are stiff, that may have limited strength and power to get up into standing. And then the amount of detritus that we all collect in our homes, in each room, between rooms. I was doing an assessment last week with a lady, very capable, but she's living with quite bad arthritis, and she wants to stay in her multi-floor townhouse. And what she was doing, because she has a very small console table in her front hallway, so between the kitchen and the front door, and as she's coming in from the garage and stuff, she's got a small console table. And then she was using the staircase, basically the risers on the staircase, or sorry, the treads, you know, to put her cell phone, to put her sunglasses, to do all of these things. And her daughter, who also happens to be an OT, and myself, were like, what are you doing? Like, just get a bigger console table, get those things off of the stairs. Anyway, it sometimes takes an outside set of eyes to help show what's possible, and to make suggestions with love and you know, kindness, not authority. So some easy wins is to think about raising the height of furniture. You do want your feet to be able to get flat on the ground. The image there on the upper right kind of shows this lady tiptoeing. That's going to be too high, but you don't want it so low that you're having to really power up to get out of bed or off the sofa. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but under these sofa legs that this gentleman is sitting on, there are actually furniture risers, which are relatively inexpensive. You know, they don't necessarily look the best, but they're not terrible if it means that you can be independent. Keep those walking paths clear, and then thinking about, you know, firm seating. And in my case, again, I'm not that tall, so you get a soft, low, deep sofa or chair, I'm basically going to be stuck there. So, you know, some people do have to actually change up their furniture, not their whole, you know, not every room in the house, but, you know, common seats or seating areas. And then, much like the, you know, accessibility, visitability, and inclusive design piece that Maimu talked about, we want to recognize and draw attention to the fact that when we're talking about aging in place, it's more than safety. I certainly don't ever go in and try to encourage or invite people to modify their homes using fear. Oh, you could fall. Oh, like that's not effective. It's a scare tactic and I don't like it. Rather, I like to use this idea of, your home is a place of treasured memories. Hopefully it's a place where you entertain, or if you're going out to other friends or family members' homes, that you can go and be entertained and connected. And so if we're focusing only on that accessibility, kind of survivability level, that's fine if you're recovering from a hip replacement or something, but that's not living. Right? We want people to strive to be a little bit better, which is where kind of that visitability piece, maybe even some of the universal design features start to play a role. And then ideally, if we think about how we can make our homes be spaces where we can thrive, where we truly all have a sense of belonging and inclusion and participation, that's when we're talking about, we're going way and above survival. And unfortunately, especially in kind of that acute and subacute illness cure, aka healthcare system that we have, so much is focused on the survival and very little is on the strive or thrive, which is where folks like Maimu and myself, who are so passionate about universal and inclusive design, really, I think we do our best to shine and to instill that enthusiasm in others, because, life is for living. It's not for sitting around and waiting to die. So just in the interest of time, I don't want to spend too much time on each of the remainder slides, but I want to call out the fact that much as there is design for physical impairments or limitations, there are things that we can do for people who are experiencing cognitive, especially memory changes or changes in how their brain organizes information. It's not that the home and the environment is going to prevent or avoid the need to have additional personal care, but it can really help the individual who's maybe at an early stage of a cognitive impairment, or maybe is recovering from a concussion, etc., to basically put into place some of the features and things that help them. So, this is just an example of a really nice, I think it's like $30 on online Amazon or something. So this calendar with the date, the weather, the time, using online virtual assistants like Siri and whatever, Google, labeling things and having things in one place. So a basket on the front console, or wherever you come into the house, so that you're so this idea of the adult version of head, shoulders, knees, and toes is wallet, glasses, keys, and phone. So have a spot where you can put all of those things. Also, and we talked about this, so again, I won't belabor it, but this idea of supporting social connections, both where you can get out and visit with other people, but people are welcome and can manage well in your own home. And then in terms of when to think about getting extra help, so when it's not, when home modifications and adaptations aren't quite enough. So if you've had a fall or a near fall, if you experience pain, but also shortness of breath, loss of energy, etc., during daily activities, if you find that you're avoiding parts of your home, including going out, so you're actually becoming isolated at home, if you're feeling unsure or anxious about your safety, and that's security, but also safety in terms of, oh, I don't take a shower or bathe anymore because I'm worried about falling. And then, because we're not always the best judge of when we might have changed, because we often make small incremental changes that we may not even be aware of, or we may kind of just dismiss and diminish. It's like, oh, that's fine. Oh, I'm fine. And then we realize, oh my gosh, it's actually been, 5 months since I went to my friend's house or something. So if friends or family members, express concern with how you're managing with daily activities due to a physical or a cognitive issue, that's when you really should sort of reach out and see, what help is available through home care, through private providers, and others. So that's where an occupational therapist can come in, and there's lots of things, different things that we do. And again, there's government home care occupational therapists. There's some outpatient programs for older adults, and then there's folks like myself that offer private in-home services. And it's really about as Andres had described when he was introducing, I look at the whole picture. I don't only look at, home safety or accessibility. So just to wrap up, there are some common myths. So this is the mindset piece that, we talk about, either an open mind or a closed mind, that people equate even making some small changes with giving up. I've lost my independence. It's not actually, the idea that I'll deal with it later, or it's too expensive, or I'm not ready. An expression or a phrase that I heard in the end of last year that I really like is that you'll never feel ready, because ready isn't a feeling, it's a decision. And that, I think, is a really powerful way of thinking about it, because if we wait until we feel ready, that day won't come. Because the psychology of our brain, how our brains are designed to work, is it will continue to resist change because we'll never feel ready. We have to make the choice before we feel ready or are ready, because the key takeaways here are that some small changes can now done in the present can prevent bigger problems later. That home modifications and changes that we've been talking about, it doesn't take away your independence, it actually supports your independence. If you use a microwave oven, if you wear glasses, hearing aids, if you use a remote control for your television, if you use a cell phone, you are already using assisted devices that are universal, all ages, all abilities, and home modifications can and should be part of that continuum of things that actually enable activity rather than make people feel less independent. The best time to adapt is before there's a crisis, and that aging in the right place in some cases can mean relocating. And that's a hard conversation, but it's one, again, that I know Maimu and I, have with folks. And it's not a split decision, but it can be an important part of the conversation. So sorry, I forgot. Because people always say, is there any money for this? So short answer is not really. There are government disability tax credits. So first of all, there's the disability tax credit, which for people who are eligible provides some sort of annual kind of income, if you will. It's very small, but it can maybe offset something. There's the home accessibility, home safety tax credit. There's the caregiver tax credit, the seniors care at home tax credit, multi-generational home renovation tax credit. So, all of this is, there's limits on it, but, you really want to kind of be aware. And I'm not an accountant. I always say, please don't take my advice or information as the de facto, but know that there is some funding out there for smaller items like bath seats, even. Yeah, I will. Thank you. There's also some funding through the deductible medical expense based on household income. There's the March of Dimes Home and Vehicle Modification Program. For veterans, there would be funding through Veterans Affairs, and then loans or financing through a bank, through family, or sometimes even through contractors and renovators. And this is just a short list of some renovators and contractors in the Toronto area. It's alphabetical, no favoritism, and no endorsement intended. So want to thank you, and sorry I did go over time, but I know that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and I also welcome any conversation in the future if I can be of help. So thank you, and thank you for Mara for the reminder about the time.
And thank you, Margot. It's there's a lot of overlap in what we discussed, so that's fantastic. I will just flip through a few photos. I won't spend too much on it. I'm going to just share the screen because we may have some questions that people want to ask. So I'm quickly going over to my photos. There we go. And I am going to just do this. So I'm just going to double check that you can see what's on screen. Okay. Okay. I didn't get a clear understanding of, can you see the photo that I'm showing? Oh, if the group can't see the photo.
Yeah, it's like in the practice menu, we're seeing your
yes, I have
Explorer.
brought it over to the other screen. It may be that we may have to forego the photos in that place. Bringing it over.
Yeah, you'd have to stop sharing and reshare if you're moving your screen, because we
Hi,
don't see when
Maimu.
you move on your.
Yes.
I think let's move on to Q&A, and we can hopefully share
Okay.
those somehow later on.
Okay, if I can.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's do it another time. Go ahead, go with the
Awesome.
Q&A. And I'll
Okay.
Stop sharing.
Thank you so much to both of you, Margot and Maimu. This is the first time that we've done this kind of presentation. So it'll be great to hear feedback from our audience. So for our Q&A, we have 8 minutes to go, so we don't have not much time. We're only going to be taking written questions, so please put them in the chat box, and Andis is looking that over. And Maimu and Margot, we will really have to keep these really short, but we can write an article, do something, put something online afterwards, and the audience can ask more questions as well. So I'm going to start off with the first one. I have a friend whose mother goes to TLPA every week, and she said to me, you know what, I'm going to stay as strong as my mother is. I don't think I'm going to need this stuff. I can put my bedroom in the 3rd floor, whatever. I'm not going to need all this. So could maybe each of you answer very briefly, starting with Margot, what you answer to someone saying something like that?
So I would say, I hear you, I agree. And if and when you're ready to make any changes or curious about what changes you might want to think about making, help is available, or the answers are available.
Thank you. What do you think, Mama, when someone says, I'll never need that?
That is a challenge. I think Margot's used this term just amongst ourselves that sometimes you can't do anything. It's the person's own decision, obviously. It may be a case where they reach a point where the wheels fall off, so to speak, and then decisions need to be made. So we can't force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do.
Thank you. I mean, it's a tough one when we feel great and we think like we're never going to have to do any of this. So we do have a question from the chat. What constitutes a non-slip floor, and any comments regarding vanities? So bathrooms.
Yeah, so non-slip floor, there is something called a coefficient of friction, which is basically the slipperiness of flooring. And whether it's hardwood, engineered flooring, or tiles, a supplier will be able to tell you what that coefficient of friction is. That's the really technical way of looking at it. There is coating that you can put inside bathtubs or on flooring. And then the other piece of advice that I would have there is, don't go with really tiny tile or huge oversized tile, especially with no grout lines. Medium-sized tile with some grout lines is a really nice kind of speed bump. If you did kind of slip and fall, that would stop you from maybe going right down.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question. Sorry, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo it. This non-slip flooring is very, obviously very important.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead with your next question.
All right, so we have a question from Zanet. Does OHIP cover visits to assess home accessibility, or do you need to hire an occupational therapist in private practice?
Yeah, so OHIP coverage through Ontario Health at Home would cover a government-funded occupational therapist. Their priority is home safety. So I too was once a home care OT. You're going to get 1 or 2 visits. They're going to do a very high level assessment and make recommendations, which is essentially many of what we talked about here with regards to accessibility and inclusion and home modifications. That's a specialty, and so somebody would need to look at hiring an OT privately.
Right. Margot, any comment on that?
That was me.
Oh, sorry. That was
I think
Margot.
Margot answered it very well. So.
Okay, fantastic. We have a question about detailed list of available grants and assistance, but I believe we got some of those. Do you want to add anything to that? And we can share the list later on. For assistance for home modification, basically.
Yeah. When we share information in terms of a handout, we'll make sure that that information is in there.
Okay, super. We have a long question, but that's gonna be a bit difficult to read at this point. Is there anything you would like to add at this point that we haven't quite covered yet? Or that should be added?
Take that?
I'm just I've watched Margot do her work, and in as far as occupational therapy is concerned, her specialty is the older set of individuals. So I've learned a lot from Margot along the way, and again, I think the more we can make our homes work for ourselves throughout our life, it just makes the whole life process easier, if at all possible. And it's not always an expensive proposition.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
And expense is a relative term, right? As I say, if somebody were to spend $200 or even $2,000 on some home modifications, if the quote unquote cost benefit analysis of that is somebody remaining in their home versus the emotional and the financial upheaval of moving, that to me, and I'm not saying that everybody has $2,000 to spend, but that's a small price to pay to be able to continue to live in a place that holds such meaning.
Thank you so much. And I was thinking, if you need to make some changes in your home, it probably makes sense to, if you can, to think about this slightly before making a big investment that you might have to make changes to in a couple of years, possibly.
Rolf's had a very pertinent comment in the chat, and this was about front-mounted stove controls, especially electronic touch panels and push-button systems, which are a known safety risk because people or pets can brush against them, turn them on accidentally without noticing that. And safety agencies have documented this program and have actually implemented formal recalls. And CBC News reported more than 130,000 of these stoves were recalled in Canada following incidents where burners turned on unexpectedly and caused injuries. So this is something we should all think about, especially if you're going to be changing your stove.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you should change your stove.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very, very much. If you have any more questions, please feel free to write to TLPA. You can find us at latvianseniors.org. And our next First Thursday in English will be on February 5th with wine tasting with Zinta Stepanons. We'll also be online. So Matis, if you can show our presenters once again, please. Thank you so very, very much, everybody, for joining us. And you can see a replay of this workshop at our YouTube channel, YouTube at /@TLPA Toronto. Thank you so very, very much.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much,
Bye-bye.
Margot and Maimu. This has been really very knowledgeable and very pertinent, especially because I was a family physician and I dealt a lot with geriatrics and nursing homes and stuff like that. And all of this information is something that everybody should know about, even if it's not pertinent at this very moment, because it'll allow you to think about what to do when you're renovating, when you're changing place. This information will sort of give you an idea when is a good thought to move into a better domicile and so on. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Thank you.